There are some stories you don't tell at parties, not because they're embarrassing, but because once you say them out loud, they feel real again. This isn't a ghost story I heard growing up. This isn't something passed down through family rumor. This is something that's followed me for 25 years. And it started with a house across from a cemetery. The summer of 2000 was supposed to be ordinary. My parents had finally bought a house, a modest, single-story place in a quiet Texas town with barely 4,500 people. The kind of town where everyone knew your last name before learning your first. The house was long and low, stretched wide across its lot. A shallow porch, windows that faced the street like unblinking eyes, and across the road, the cemetery. From the living room window, you could see rows of headstones sloping gently toward a thin line of trees. Some stones leaned, others stood upright and proud. A few were so worn their names had vanished completely. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Graves didn't move, shadows didn't breathe. Ghosts, at least the ones from movies and campfire stories, didn't exist. At first, the house behaved like any other. It creaked at night as the wood cooled. Things went missing and turned up their edder. Days later, doors popped, pipes knocked. Nothing unusual. Nothing except my bedroom door. Every night before bed, I locked it. Not once. Twice. Sometimes 3 times. I would jiggle the knob, make sure it held. And every single morning, without fail, I woke up to find it wide open. The lock wasn't broken. The hinges weren't loose. There were no drafts, no footsteps, no explanation. When I mentioned it, my parents laughed. My siblings shrugged. Houses do weird things, they said. I wanted to believe them. But there was something about that house at night. It didn't feel loud. It didn't feel violent. It felt awake. Everything changed when the carpet came out. My parents decided to replace it with wooden floors, cleaner, brighter. But wood doesn't forgive sound. Every step echoes. Every movement announces itself. That's when the footsteps began. They weren't random. They weren't rushed. They paced. From my bedroom door, down the hallway, to the living room window, and back again. Slow. Deliberate. Like someone was measuring the house one step at a time. Sometimes, from the corner of my eye, I'd catch a glimpse of him. A small boy. He never stayed long enough for me to focus on him. The second I turned my head, he vanished, like a shadow slipping behind the light. Soon, I wasn't the only one noticing. Shadows fell where nothing stood. Tapping echoed from the floorboards when no one was walking. The air felt heavier at night, like the house was holding its breath. Then one evening, he stopped hiding. He stood there, fully visible. A boy, small and pale. Dark hair hanging flat against his head, and his face, one side was completely normal. The other twisted and distorted, as if something had gone terribly wrong halfway through creating him. My siblings saw him. My parents saw him. But no one spoke. No one asked questions. No one acknowledged what we'd seen. Silence felt safer. Years passed like that. Then came the night that changed everything. It was sometime between 2007 and 2008. Around 3 in the morning, the hour when the house always felt most alive. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was sitting beside me on the couch. We were talking quietly the way people do when the rest of the house is asleep. From where we sat, you could see everything. The kitchen doorway, the bathroom, the hallway leading back to my bedroom. Without warning, my vision vanished. Not dimmed. Not blurred. Gone. A heavy, absolute darkness slammed over my eyes, like a blindfold pulled tight. I couldn't see the glow of the TV. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face. My girlfriend grabbed my arm and screamed. She jumped in place, panicked. Her nails dug into my skin. I could hear her breathing, short, frantic gasps, and feel her heart pounding through her grip. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the darkness lifted. The room was normal. The lights were on. Nothing looked out of place. She was crying. "There was a boy," she whispered. "He was standing in the kitchen doorway. He walked toward us, right up to the chair next to us, and then he disappeared." Something cold settled in my chest. I couldn't pretend anymore. That was the night I finally said it out loud. The house was haunted. That night wasn't the beginning, and it wasn't the end. It was just the moment I stopped denying what had been watching us from across the cemetery, and what would follow me long after we left that house behind, because the boy didn't stay there. He came with me. Once you admit something is real, it stops pretending to be subtle. In the beginning, the boy only watched. He paced. He appeared. But after that night on the couch, after someone else finally saw him too, everything changed. After I told my girlfriend the truth, the house felt different. Not louder, not angrier, closer, like something had realized it no longer needed to hide. Strange things started happening more often, small at first, but impossible to ignore. One night, after dropping her off, I went into the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was quiet, everyone else was asleep. As I reached for the cabinet, a sound cut through the silence, a sharp, mechanical chirping. My niece's toy bird. It had been broken for years. The batteries were dead. It hadn't made a sound since before we moved in, but there it was, winding itself up. Then it started to sing. The sound echoed through the kitchen, louder than it ever should have been. Tinny. Wrong. Like it didn't belong in the room at all. I stood frozen. That's when I saw movement in the living room, a silhouette sliding across the floor. It was darker than the shadows around it, and it didn't have a head. I didn't stay to understand it. I ran to my bedroom and shut the door, locking it like I always did, pretending, desperately, that I hadn't seen anything at all. But pretending doesn't stop things that want to be noticed. Another night, I came home from a club around 3 a.m. The house was silent when I walked in. I locked my bedroom door and turned off the light. Almost immediately, a bright white glow spilled out from beneath the door. Too bright to be hallway light. Too clean to be headlights. Just white. Then a voice spoke. Deep. Cold. Too close. We got him. The light vanished. The house went quiet again. I didn't sleep that night. The boy wasn't alone anymore. And he wasn't playing. Family gatherings didn't stop him either. One afternoon, my cousin came over with us. At some point, he excused himself to use the bathroom. Seconds later, he saw it. A small boy standing in the hallway. Then, gone. My cousin came back out slowly, his face pale and confused, his eyes fixed on the spot where the boy had been. "You saw him, didn't you?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When we finally told him everything, he didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He grabbed his keys and left. He never stayed over again. That was when I realized something important. The boy was selective. He chose who could see him. By 2010, my girlfriend, now my wife, and I moved into our own apartment. I thought distance might break whatever connection existed. It didn't. The activity followed us. Not as intense at first, more like reminders. Objects moved slightly. Doors creaked open when we were alone. The feeling of being watched returned at night. Then in 2014, our son was born. Jason, bright, curious, always smiling, and never really alone. In 2016, my daughter Mia was born. She was perfect, with wide, beautiful eyes. When our son was 4, we noticed he would talk to someone who wasn't there, laughing, pausing, answering questions we couldn't hear. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one day. He looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. Nui. The name hit me harder than anything I'd seen before. When I asked what Nui looked like, Jason described him perfectly. One side of his face normal, the other twisted. He said Nui had died in an accident, taken to the hospital, never came home. The next day, I went back to the cemetery from my childhood. I searched every headstone, every marker. There was no Nui, only a few unmarked graves near the back. That was the moment I understood something I'd been avoiding. The boy wasn't attached to a house. He was attached to us, and he was especially drawn to children. There's something deeply unsettling about a child who's afraid of something you can't see. Adults can rationalize fear. We explain it away. We tell ourselves stories to survive it. Children don't do that. They just react. And when my children started reacting to Nui, I knew whatever rules he had been following were changing. For a while after Jason told us about Nui, things stayed quiet. Not gone, just waiting. We prayed more. We told Jason to ignore him. We told him not to talk back, not to answer questions, not to invite him to play. And for a short time, it worked. But Nui didn't disappear. He adapted. One time, Jason ran screaming from the kitchen. It was late evening. The lights were on. We were only a room away. He burst into the living room, face pale, breath hitching in his chest. "The devil's there," he cried. "Not a devil. The devil." I went into the kitchen immediately. Every light was on. Nothing was out of place, no shadows, no cold. But Jason refused to go back in. He clung to me like the floor itself was dangerous. That was the first time Nui stopped looking like a boy to him. A few years later, our daughter Mia was around 4. She has a speech disability, which made everything harder. She couldn't always explain what she felt, only that she felt it. And she felt him. She would freeze in doorways, point to corners, refuse to be alone in rooms she had played in just days before. At night, she cried without explanation. Sometimes she'd wake up already shaking, like the fear had been there before the dream started. She couldn't say his name, but she knew where he stood. She knew when he was close. Some nights, she wouldn't even step into her bedroom. Other nights, she'd sit up in bed staring at nothing, her eyes tracking something we couldn't see moving across the room. We moved again. New walls, new floors, new address, same presence. The activity followed us, settling into the new place like it had always been there. Doors opened, lights flickered, the air changed at night, and Nui stayed interested in the kids, always the kids. By 2020, our youngest daughter, Ava, was born. She was just a baby, but something about her drew him in immediately. We could feel it. That year, we moved into another house, hoping, again, that this time would be different. For a few months, my brother-in-law and a couple of his friends stayed with us. They slept in the living room. The first night, they complained about something brushing against their feet. Soft, light, like a child walking too close. The second night, they saw him. A small boy pacing between them as they lay half awake, circling, watching. They whispered to each other, annoyed, assuming it was Jason wandering out of bed again, but Jason was asleep in his room. They didn't sleep much after that. A few nights later, loud banging erupted against our windows. Not tapping, not knocking, banging, hard enough to rattle the glass and shake the frames. I ran outside, checked the yard, the street, the side of the house. There was nothing. No footprints. No damage, no movement, just silence. The next morning, we were all in the kitchen when the back door swung open on its own. I closed it. Seconds later, the refrigerator door opened. Back door, fridge, over and over. It felt deliberate, like a pattern, like Nui reminding us he was still here. We tried everything. Prayer, ignoring him, firmly telling him to leave. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Then came the night that broke any illusion of control. Mia had been uneasy for days, clinging to us, refusing to sleep alone. My wife stood near her bedroom doorway, folding laundry. The air shifted, cold, heavy, wrong. Mia screamed. Her body jerked forward violently. Her hair lifted, pulled hard as if grabbed by an invisible fist. My wife watched in horror as a small, shadowy hand released its grip and vanished into the corner near the dresser. There was nothing tangled in her hair, nothing caught. No explanation, just the cold, lingering long after the screaming stopped. That was the moment Nui crossed the line. He wasn't just watching anymore. He was touching. After that night, fear stopped being abstract. It lived in our house, it slept in our children's rooms, and it waited for us to let our guard down. There's a point where fear stops feeling like panic and starts feeling like routine. When something has been with you long enough, you don't ask if it will happen again. You just wait for how. By the time Nui crossed the line, the house already knew what he was capable of. After the bedroom incident, we stopped pretending this was something temporary. We didn't talk about Nui in front of the kids anymore. We didn't say his name unless we had to. But silence didn't weaken him. It sharpened him. Some nights, the house felt almost normal. Quiet, still, comfortable enough to make us forget. Other nights, it turned cinematic. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight, slow at first, then heavier, like something pacing with purpose. Lights flickered in rapid bursts, never burning out, never stopping long enough to relax. Shadows stretched across the walls where nothing should have been casting them. Corners looked deeper than they were. Hallways felt longer, and the whispers started. Low, overlapping, childlike, not loud enough to understand, but close enough to feel. Sometimes they drifted from room to room, moving just ahead of us like they wanted us to follow. Nui, come play. It didn't sound like an invitation. It sounded like a trap. One night I made the mistake of answering. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, and said his name out loud. Nui. The temperature dropped instantly, not gradually, instantly. A rush of cold moved past me, fast and deliberate, brushing my skin like breath against my ear. Then came the laughter. Soft, unmistakable, close enough that I could feel it more than hear it. That was when I learned something important. Nui didn't like being ignored, but he loved being acknowledged. After that, the activity escalated again. Toys rattled violently in their bins, plastic clattering against plastic like something trying to claw its way out. Doors creaked open and slammed shut without warning. Footsteps ran through the hallway at night. Not pacing anymore, running. Too fast, too light. Always stopping just outside bedroom doors. One night, we heard them stop at Mia's door, then silence, the kind that presses against your ears. When I opened the door, nothing was there, but the room was freezing. The worst nights were the ones that felt orchestrated, like Nui was showing us what he could do. Lights flickered room to room in sequence, kitchen, hallway, living room, like something moving through the house on purpose. Shadows gathered along the walls, stretching toward the living room as if pulled by a single point. The house felt alive, breathing, watching. That night, everything happened at once. Toys rattled violently. Doors slammed. Footsteps thundered down the hallway faster than ever before. The walls seemed to lean inward, shadows thickening, pulling toward the living room like they were being swallowed. I ran to Mia's room. She was shaking, clutching her blanket like it was the only solid thing left in the house. My wife held her close, eyes wide, unblinking. Then, silence. The lights steadied, the shadows retreated, the house went still, as if nothing had happened at all. But we knew. Nui had done it on purpose. He wanted us to see everything he was capable of. After that night, the activity slowed. Not stopped, slowed. Weeks passed without incident, then days, then suddenly reminders. Objects moved slightly, lights flickered once, then stayed steady. It was like living with something that knew exactly how much fear we could carry before breaking, and it adjusted accordingly. That was when I finally understood the truth. Nui wasn't chaos. He was control. He knew when to scare us. He knew when to pull back. He knew how to wait. People like endings. They want stories to conclude with answers, with solutions, with something defeated or explained. This story doesn't end that way, because Nui didn't leave. He stayed. After the night, everything happened at once. We waited for it to happen again. Days passed, then weeks. The house felt restrained, not peaceful, not safe. Restrained. Lights stayed on, doors stayed closed, toys stayed still. The kids slept through the night. At first, the quiet felt like relief. Then it started to feel intentional, like Nui had learned something about us. He didn't need chaos to be present. He just needed time. We stopped talking about him openly. We didn't say his name unless something forced us to. We learned that acknowledgement mattered, that calling attention to him was like opening a door. Sometimes, when the house felt heavy, I spoke to him quietly. Not angry, not afraid, like you would speak to a child. I told him to stop, to leave us alone, that he wasn't welcome to scare the kids. Sometimes, he listened. The activity would fade for weeks at a time. Other times, something small would happen, just enough to remind us he was still there, a light flickering once, a door opening an inch. Footsteps stopping just out of sight, never enough to prove anything to someone else, always enough for us. Friends don't like staying over. They feel uncomfortable but can't explain why. Some complain about the air feeling heavy. Others say they didn't sleep well. A few have seen him. They don't stay long after that. We don't push the issue. You learn quickly who's meant to experience something like this and who isn't. The kids are older now. Jason doesn't talk about Noai anymore, but sometimes he pauses mid-sentence, like he's listening to something no one else can hear. Mia still avoids certain corners of the house, certain rooms at night. Ava, the youngest, watches spaces that should be empty. Her eyes track movement that never quite reaches the light. We don't ask questions, we're afraid of the answers to. I've thought about the cemetery more than I'd like to admit, about the unmarked graves near the back, about the absence of a name, about what happens when something is forgotten. Sometimes I wonder if Nui followed us because we were the first people who noticed him. Sometimes I wonder if he was lonely. Other times, I don't wonder at all. There are nights when I wake up just before 3 in the morning. The house is quiet, too quiet. I lie there, listening. Sometimes I hear soft footsteps pacing, slow and deliberate, moving from the hallway to the living room window. The same path he walked all those years ago. I don't get up. I don't look. Some things don't need attention to exist. It's been 25 years since my parents bought that house across from the cemetery. We've moved more times than I can count. Different walls, different streets, different cities, same presence. We don't know why he chose us. We don't know what he wants. We don't know if he'll ever leave. We just know his name. We call him Nui, and he is never far away. If you're listening to this late at night, if the house feels a little quieter than it should, if something feels like it's standing just out of sight, don't look too hard. Some things follow better when they aren't acknowledged. All right, guys, the horror ends here for tonight. There will be more terrifying experiences on this channel, so don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Share it with your horror nerd friends. If you've experienced something paranormal, you can email your story to the address in the description. See you in the next video. Stay safe until then, if you can.